Good evening, friends. Operational situation at the front by the end of February 25th. We will start with you from the Bakhmut direction, since there are no significant changes in the Kapysko-Lemensky sector of the front, as well as in the Serebryansky Forest and Bologorovka, so we start from the Bakhmut direction. Let's talk in more detail about this direction. We'll start with Bogdanovka. First of all, the assault operations are continuing in this sector of the front, and the enemy is only intensifying. As we talked about in previous broadcasts, intensifying the onslaught on a number of settlements, on a number of positions. Information on the situation in this sector of the front was updated today. What we were talking about is attacks within the gray zone. And now let's go into more detail. The first point is the positions between Bogdanovka and Velyanovka. A number of Ossinters paint this area red, as they report that it has come under the control of Russian troops. On the basis of what we talked about yesterday with you, that Russian troops attacked, there are battles for fortified areas. There was no information from the Russian side, not only from ours, so the situation remains to be clarified. But the fighting in this area continued and continues today. In any case, by the evening they were still going on. Whether it was possible to advance further is unknown, but the intensity is quite high. This area remains to be clarified. The second point, we said that at the clarification, we talked about it yesterday and today on the daytime broadcast north of Ivanovo, that there were attacks in the direction of Mount Balbo. It means that the enemy managed to advance on this section of the front of the advance, in a section up to 125 kilometers wide, to a depth of 680 meters. At the same time, heavy footage from this area was published today. Russian fighters, having captured 9 AFU fighters, shot them already being unarmed. Therefore, this situation is quite difficult to perceive, but it shows the picture that is on the battlefield today. Because this is not the first case, especially over the past 2 months, there have been a lot of these cases compared to previous periods. Well, let's make changes. So the situation for yesterday, the situation for today. It would probably be appropriate even to say here in the context of 48 hours, the situation was noted, because the assault actions by the Russian troops are continuing in the direction of, I repeat, Baba Mountain. In the direction of Ivanovskoye, attempts are also being made to advance, attacking conditionally as we said, from Kromov north of Stavko along the river. These attacks are in the direction of one of the supports. Now they are conducting assault operations. We once talked a few weeks ago about this small landing, north of Ivanovo, that there would be a bet on it from the enemy, after which they would transfer additional forces and begin assault operations of Ivanovo from 2 directions, north and east. We'll talk about this later. So, according to the situation, the fighting continues within the gray zone. By the fighters. There is information that these are 9 fighters, probably of the 92nd Brigade, but I think there will be more information about this a little later. But, this once again shows that first of all, there are laws of war, rules, there are conventions, but as we see, they do not always work, unfortunately. Not always. These cases have become especially frequent recently. On the one hand, I personally know this information here, that work is being done with our fighters to prevent such cases, that if you are captured, so that there are no shootings. Because, well, there were similar shots from our side. We remember, it was still that year, at the beginning of the year, there was such a moment, but this incident, it is on the world stage, so it has had a negative impact. Therefore, I know that work is being done with the APU, so that there are no such cases. But unfortunately, the enemy, no matter how many of these cases appear, they only, as we see, increase. This speaks, among other things, about responsibility, no matter what the war is, but in no case should you turn into animals. No matter how hard it is, no matter how hard it is. Assault operations are also continuing along Ivanovsko. Here, the enemy is more now, I would say, carrying out stabilization measures to prevent a serious counterattack from the AFU, so as not to be knocked out of their positions, and accordingly, to hold this area, in order, firstly, to increase pressure from the north, and secondly, not only from two directions, as I said, there is still a likely third direction, respectively from the south-southeast of Ivanovo, but Russian troops may still try to strike, because there is a very large activity in the direction of the T-shaped intersection with the Chernobyl Garden Association. Attacks from an abandoned airfield, also in the western direction there was a vector of attacks, in the north there was also an attack. In this area, it was possible to repel attacks at the intersection. The situation is being clarified, because there are a number of positions in the fields, and whether or not Russian troops control this information is being clarified. But as we can see, the enemy is increasing pressure here, from the north and from the south. We are moving to the Avdeevka direction. In the Avdeevka direction, we'll start with the Swallow, but we'll finish with the northern one. It's short here. So, in the Swallow's way, today there was official information that, I will make a remark right away. Allegedly the units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces retreated to the western outskirts of the village of Lastakina, where they took up prepared defensive positions. This information, despite the fact that it is official from a representative of Tavria, it does not correspond to reality, because the enemy publishes, first of all, footage. I have already published this information in my telegram to you for review, but it does not correspond. Yes, we have a difficult situation, and it is better to show what it really is, and what difficulties there are. Why? Because everything is fine with us every time. Do you remember what happened for Avdeevka? A few days before the fall of Avdeevka, I said that I criticized official statements that everything was fine with us again. But this would seriously undermine trust. Trust in officials. And the question of mobilization is at stake in the foreseeable near future. Moreover, increased mobilization. Moreover, which will be accompanied by certain restrictions, if you do not come to the shopping center after receiving the summons. But, at the same time, the confidence of the population in the army and the representatives of the army continues to be undermined. This is absolutely wrong, I think. Therefore, it is better to speak as it is, in order to at least leave it at the same level as it is, but in no way worse than what happened after Avdeevka. Now in the north, the enemy conducts assault operations. Here in the evening, we note a minimal advance to a depth of 150 meters. The fighting is going on in the village itself. The enemy is pressing from several directions, trying, including from the south, to break through the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine, to advance along T-shaped intersections, to gain a foothold. Well, of course, from Avdeevka itself, assault actions and vectors are so from the same Swallow. Vector so from the locality of Lastokin, shows that the enemy naturally does not conduct hostilities. In the locality of Lastokin itself, attacks the north. If he had been fighting in Lastokin, he naturally would not have attacked from the western part, in the direction of the northeastern part of the north. But that would be illogical. Yes, they are fighting, they are walking around. You just know, against the background of just the same shooting, of our unarmed 9 fighters, there is a lot of anger inside. It's hard to hold. But it's one thing for them, it's another thing when our people also pour this into their ears. I don't want to listen to this at all anymore. I just understand that propaganda should work. But if propaganda is cheap, it will be with a remark. Cheap propaganda. Therefore, but when it is from official representatives, I consider it absolutely wrong, inappropriate. It is better to talk, to embellish, but not at all in the form that it is. Otherwise, I repeat, trust is undermined. And after that, of course, the question arises, why do the fighters surrender to the court? And they are not even taken prisoner anymore, but are shot. Why don't people want to go to war? Why it is necessary to introduce restrictions by law, so that people go? Why don't they want to? Well, there are probably reasons, and logical ones at that. Moving on. Emotionally I agree, but I'm just fed up already. Very fed up. In the third year, and today it's already the third year of the war. Pervomeyskaya, Nevelskaya without any changes. Kurikovsky direction. There is still pressure along Georgievka, in the victory area, and in the area of the veins of the Trudovskaya mine shaft without significant changes. At the same time, after the victory of the situation, I will make a remark. In addition to victory, the situation here remains to be further clarified, because there are a number of attacks north of the settlement within the gray zone. Therefore, here we are still clarifying within the gray zone. According to Novomikhailivka, we do not fix any new visual changes, therefore without any changes. And we move on to the locality of Rabotina. So, first of all, attempts by Russian troops to improve the tactical situation continue. Today, according to reports from the field, there was another roll-up again, but, like the previous few days, up to 20-30 personnel are attacking there with less large forces, which means fighters, but nevertheless they are there. By the evening, by the end of the day, there is information. First of all, let's start with the fact that Russian sources have already reported that they failed to gain a foothold in the center, and are beginning to complain that there is simply no place to gain a foothold there, so they retreated to the south. They did not completely retreat, because there were shots of the work of the APU just in the central part, and they did not retreat. Namely, they knocked out. Therefore, the situation remains tense, but controlled. The APU is doing everything possible, and we see, despite all the difficulties, it is possible to stabilize relative to the situation. At the same time, the enemy is not only pressing from the south, and at the same time showing activity between recruitment and work.